A very good evening and welcome to our Thursday evening thought from St Michael at the Northgate Church. And this evening we are looking at a Bible verse in Numbers, and this little series is about Bible phrases that perhaps made the early listeners sit up and think. And the Bible phrase today is also the cucumbers. Also the cucumbers. This is the context. Numbers chapter 11 verse 4. The rabble with them began to crave other food. So we know how the narrator thinks about that crowd of people, the rabble with them. And again the Israelites started wailing and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna." The people of Israel had been in slavery in Egypt, and then by the gracious and miraculous hand of God, they had started their journey towards the promised land. And one would have thought that sense of we're heading to the promised land would have kept them joyful, hopeful, and not complaining. But for many of us, even if we feel the destination is going to be good, we quite like a bit of complaining along the way. Are we nearly there yet? And manna had been provided slightly defensively. The narrator goes on to say that manna was actually quite nice. This manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. The people went around gathering it and then ground it in a hand mill or crushed it in a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into loaves. It's very versatile food. And it tasted like something made with olive oil. Something made with olive oil. If you are travelling through the desert, something made with olive oil perhaps is not too bad after all. And it was sustaining them and it was keeping them going. That had been miraculously provided as well. Bread of heaven indeed. But quite often we take so much for granted. I can't remember which writer it was who said that if the stars came out in the sky once every 1,000 years, then the whole human race would head outdoors and stand in awe and wonder. But because we are used to them each night, light pollution and cloud permitting, because we are used to it, we lose that sense of wonder. The manna was a wonderful gift. The exodus from Egypt was a wonderful gift. But these people, some of these people, began to moan. Sometimes we perhaps find it difficult to be content, and we remember the cucumbers, or melons, leeks, onions and garlic, and we think it was so good in those days. But of course, in those days it was not quite so good for the people of Israel. They were enslaved, they were oppressed, and perhaps the cucumbers did not taste quite as good as they remember them tasting. There's such a thing as the grass being greener on the other side, looking backwards as well as looking forwards. Our memories can play tricks. Moses then has to work out how he can keep this large and slightly grumpy population together and keeping moving forward. And he prays. And interestingly, in his prayer, like many prayers in the scriptures, it's more a robust negotiation than solemn words said in solemn buildings. And perhaps it's an encouragement, a reminder to us that we can reverently and humbly, we can also robustly talk with our God about those things on our mind. And God, in his grace, then provides quail as well as manna. The manna was enough. The manna was all that they needed. But God knows that we humans, we sometimes don't quite know what we need, and we think we need more than what we actually need, and in his grace and graciousness he provides. So quail is sent alongside the manna. Sometimes we want to make our point by adding further points to it. The people who complained had said this: "We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost." But they weren't quite sure that Moses had taken the point, so they then add cucumbers. Also the cucumbers, and then melons, leeks, onions and garlic. Sometimes when we want to win arguments, we will layer point on point and point but maybe the person had heard the first point perfectly well, and we needn't keep on adding layers. They raised the stakes and they mentioned the cucumbers. It sounds a bit ridiculous, and for the first listeners, by then actually in the Promised Land and hearing this read, it would have sounded a bit ridiculous, but maybe it also strikes a chord. Maybe there are times when we look back, perhaps over-longingly, and we forget what things were really like. And of course there's things in the past to be treasured and honoured, but it was not perfect then, as it is not perfect now. Perhaps also it struck a chord about not being content with what we have been given in the present situation. So it sounds a little ridiculous, also the cucumbers, but perhaps it strikes a chord. But the moral is not pressed too hard. The art of a very good storyteller. It's just left hanging for the listener to be thinking, oh, that seemed to come out of left field a little bit. I wasn't expecting the cucumbers. But for those listening, as I say now in the Promised Land, they may perhaps have wriggled a little as they wondered about the balance between honouring the past in a true and realistic way and being thankful for the present. Moses was patient and Moses prayed and the Lord continued to provide. Thank you so much for listening this evening. Next week we are going to have a little bit of a break from our streaming, just so we can regroup a little and also decide which of our evening streams are perhaps most helpful to people. So if you have any thoughts, please do contact me. I think my email is somewhere here, or certainly it's on the St. Michael's website. So next week we'll be having a break, but do, if you wish, if you long to look at something, look back at the past ones that we've done over the last 3 or 4 months. And thank you again for joining us this evening. May the rest of your day go well.